Hello, and glad you can join us. Here's what's happening on this Tuesday. An angry U.S. president warns Iran and Israel to keep the peace.
They both violated it.
As escape routes are arranged for stranded Canadians.
It gives an opening for diplomacy. I think that's the right way to put it.
The global arsenal world leaders meet to discuss defense spending.
It's definitely a challenge.
A bit too much.
Plus, weathering soaring temperatures of an extreme degree.
CTV National News with Sandy Ronaldo.
A triumphant Donald Trump says the Israel-Iran ceasefire he arranged is back in effect. Well, only time will tell if it holds, but things do appear to be returning to normal in the region. However, earlier today, a furious U.S. president lashed out at both countries, chastising them for dropping the ball and dropping bombs. An angry Trump even using profanity to make his point. CTV's Washington Bureau Chief Joy Malvin is here. And Joy, I don't ever remember a U.S. president intentionally dropping the F-bomb this way. Do you?
No, you don't hear that every day from a U.S. president for sure, Sandy. I mean, I've heard Donald Trump use some colorful language at his rallies, but that sure got our attention, especially after the U.S. waded into this war with U.S. military might. But he was clearly frustrated, Sandy.
After brokering a fragile ceasefire, the U.S. president visibly angry and let the F word fly.
We basically have two countries that have been fighting so long and so hard that they don't know what the they're doing. Do you understand that?
Sending a message to warring nations, Israel and Iran, to knock it off.
I think they both violated it. I'm not sure they did it intentionally. They couldn't rein people back. I don't like the fact that Israel went out this morning at all, and I'm going to see if I can stop it.
After agreeing to Donald Trump's ceasefire overnight, the Israeli army struck hard at Iranian government targets, including a radar site north of Tehran. And Israel says it struck back too, after Iranian missiles had been fired in the south, killing 4 Israelis. The president trying to hold this truce together, telling reporters he was firm, demanding Israel's prime minister bring back its planes and stop the bombing.
Tired of it. I think they don't want it to happen again. And Iran's not going to have a nuclear weapon, by the way. I think it's the last thing on their mind right now.
After the U.S. bombed 3 of Iran's nuclear facilities deep underground and days of Israeli strikes on nuclear targets, Iran has been weakened. But how far has Tehran nuclear ambitions been set back?
Is there any highly enriched uranium left? And are there any of these centrifuges left as well? That's a big question.
Sandy, an early U.S. intelligence report suggests that America's bunker-busting bombs may not have completely destroyed Iran's nuclear sites. And this is at odds with the president, who still insists they were obliterated. But again, this is just one battlefield assessment, and the president is still working towards a nuclear deal with Iran. Sandy?
All right, Joy, thank you so much. Well, Global Affairs is offering bus rides to Canadians desperate to get out of Israel and the West Bank as a plane load of residents leaves the region, happy to be safe and soon far from the conflict. CTV's Heather Wright now on what the minister had to say and who's on their way out. Heather.
Well, Sandy, a group of Canadians will be taking off today from Jordan bound for Athens. It's part of the Government of Canada's effort to help Canadians stuck in both Iran and Israel get out of those countries. But of course, it has been a challenge as the airspaces in both of those countries has been closed. And so people have had to travel to the border of neighboring countries in order to get help. There are roughly 6,000 Canadians and permanent residents in Israel and the West Bank, and another 5,500 in Iran, according to Global Affairs Canada. Today, Minister Anita Anand said the government has helped more than 500 Canadians leave the region, and that consular services are being added to continue to assist those looking to leave.
This work continues. We've deployed additional consular services throughout the region. throughout the border areas, and we will continue to be there to support Canadians and to advocate and ensure, to the best of our abilities, the safety and security of that region as a whole.
But some Canadians have been critical of the government's response, saying it is too slow and it's very difficult for many to get to the border of those neighboring countries. For example, I spoke with a woman today whose father is stuck in Iran. She's trying to get him out, but she says it would be roughly a 3-day journey for him to get to the border with Turkey, something at this point that is simply impossible for him to do. Sandy.
All right, Heather, thank you. Now, Mark Carney appeared on U.S. television calling for de-escalation of the conflict. The Prime Minister is in The Hague for the NATO summit, joined there by the U.S. President and other world leaders to focus on defense spending and, of course, the Middle East. CTV Jeremy Sharon is in the Netherlands covering the summit for us.
An historic NATO summit now underway in the Netherlands. Prime Minister Mark Carney joining all 32 alliance members in The Hague.
Thank you personally for your
Meeting with many today for bilateral meetings.
handshake. Okay, very good.
The summit set to focus on a new defense investment plan aimed at increasing NATO's collective readiness.
And it's important to be clear what we are potentially, and I think likely to all agree tomorrow, which is, and let's take the 5% of GDP figure, which is a big, huge, big number.
That figure would become the new baseline defense spending target. 3.5% would be core defense spending and another 1.5% on defense-related infrastructure investments. The increase would cost Canada tens of billions more a year.
How much is it actually for you?
5% of our GDP would be about $150 billion.
I mean, that's a lot.
It's a lot of numbers.
Per year?
Per year.
But a timeline to get to it is the next big question. And Canada's Foreign Affairs Minister says it will be an important part of the conversation.
And one of the dates that is being proposed is 2029. And we like to see steps along the way where there can be a re-examination of whether this is the right approach.
But Canada arrives at the summit having only just committed to meet the current 2% target this fiscal year. And some suggest Carney's government has work to do to re-establish Canada's reputation on the issue.
Canada's credibility collectively and the Canadian reputation that Mr. Carney inherited when he became Prime Minister is far from great on this issue.
An official decision on increasing the alliance's defense spending commitment will come tomorrow when all 32 member nations sit down for the summit's main meeting, where support for Ukraine is on the agenda too. Sandy?
Okay, Jeremy Sharon, thank you. Gas prices are expected to drop in many Canadian cities overnight and could be back to where they were before missiles dropped on Iran and Israel. The U.S. has called on China to prevent Iran from blocking the Strait of Hormuz, one of the world's most important shipping routes. Now, all of this could have an impact on Canada's economy, as we also learn inflation numbers held steady last month. CTV's Adrian Gabriel wraps it all up for us. Hey, Adrian, what do the numbers mean?
Sandy, trying to read the inflation tea leaves can at times be a guessing game, though one near consensus among economists, there's multiple commodities applying upward pressure and uncertainty. Take the war in the Middle East, for example. There are concerns that could drive up the cost of living for Canadians.
How are you doing today? For 3 years, inflation has been siphoning cash out of the wallets of Canadians. The cost to fill your cart with groceries feeling more expensive with each visit. While inflation held steady at 1.7% in May, the price at the grocery store increased by 3.3%. The cost of a new vehicle accelerated by 4.9%. Shelter costs, including rents and utility payments, also ticked up 3%.
Some of the so-called underlying measures of inflation, the core measures that the Bank of Canada looks at, they're still running around 3% on a yearly basis, and that's probably a bit outside the Bank of Canada's comfort zone.
The removal of the consumer carbon price at the pumps continues to drive down the price at gas stations annually, though the tentacles of the war in the Middle East are threatening to also hit the bank accounts of Canadians.
Well, any spike in oil prices inevitably leads to disruption in other markets.
Iranian officials have threatened to cut off access to the Strait of Hormuz, a key shipping route for oil and gas. The waterway, located between the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman, is just 33 kilometers wide at its narrowest point, requiring oil tankers to pass through both Iranian and Omani territorial waters. Carrying 20 million barrels of oil through the strait every day, amounting to 20% of global production, this is the only way to ship crude from the oil-rich Persian Gulf to the rest of the world. Iran controls its northern side.
The price of oil could roughly double to 150. Well, this would lower growth further and raise inflation yet further.
Oil prices have come back down after spiking during the first few days of this conflict, though the weeks ahead will likely influence the Bank of Canada's next interest rate decision, scheduled for July 30th. Sandy.
Adrian Gabriel. Well, millions of Canadians are also struggling to cope with soaring temperatures and high humidity. Heat alerts are in effect for parts of Ontario, Quebec, and into the Maritimes. CTV's John Vennavally-Rao is here now to tell us just how hot it is. Hi, John.
Sandy, it was another scorcher today. Here in Toronto, it was 35 degrees Celsius, but with the humidity, it felt like it was more in the low 40s, with heat alerts extending to Montreal, Quebec City, and out towards Halifax. Public health officials urging residents to take precautions with ongoing concerns about the elderly and vulnerable and heat causing problems on some roads. Check this out. This is pavement buckling on a highway. Look at that. That's down near Sarnia, Ontario. Shows how hot it's been the last couple of days. Yesterday, reaching the highest temperature in Toronto that it's been in nearly a decade. And here's what some had to say about the heat.
It's been really hot. It's boiling.
Definitely not great. It's hard to be outside, and I can't imagine what it'd be like for people that don't have AC at home.
Now, speaking of that, at this condo complex in Toronto, they lost air conditioning a couple of days ago. Talk about bad timing. Their residents are struggling to cope. This man bought a fan, trying to get some relief.
It's been like kind of unlivable condition. Like I couldn't sleep properly because in my bedroom, since it's facing the sun in the morning, like it was over 30 degrees just like inside the bedroom.
Now, the City of Toronto has extended the hours at some of its pools to 11:45 tonight to help people cool off. And the good news, there should be a break in the heat wave tonight, with the high temperatures in many cities across the east tomorrow expected to be below or around 30 degrees. Sandy.
Okay, John. Let's pick up on that with CTV, your morning meteorologist, Kelsey McEwen. And Kelsey, are we through the worst of it?
Sandy, people always say, oh, but it's the humidity. And it really is, because with the humidity, it feels so much warmer. You'll notice over the coming days that the temperature still stays high, but the humidity in particular drops. And that really makes it feel a lot different outside. When it is incredibly humid, your sweat can't evaporate. That's what cools you down. And so as that humidity falls, we begin to be able to regulate our body temperature more effectively. Now, the upper ridge, higher up in the atmosphere, begins to break down. At the surface, we've got a cold front coming in, and that drier air begins to flood across the region. So when we talk about the dew point, the temperature at which the air is fully saturated, when it's in the low 20s, that's really sticky. We'll see over the coming days that begins to fall, heading closer to single digits, not just in Ontario and Quebec, but also over to Atlantic Canada. We'll see a significant reduction in the amount of humidity in the air, and that will make all the difference. Sandy, back to you.
Okay, Kelsey McEwen, thank you. And dangerous weather in Quebec City last night led to the cancellation of a concert. Of course, disappointment for fans. Organizers of the Fête Nationale event asked crowds to leave the Plains of Abraham, the site of the outdoor event, because of an approaching storm. Some 70,000 people in the region were left without power. Coming up after the break, separation anxiety in Alberta.
The rightful opportunity to decide how Alberta can become stronger.
A premier's strong warning to Ottawa. Alberta NDP leader Naheed Nenshi is heading to the provincial legislature 1 year after he was selected to lead the party.
If we get one message from today, that message should be that Albertans have, across this province, resoundingly rejected the UCP's plans for taking Alberta out of Canada.
Now, the former mayor of Calgary used this by-election victory speech to criticize the Alberta government over the possibility of a referendum on separation. Nenshi won the Edmonton-Strathcona riding, which had been held by former NDP Premier Rachel Notley. Now, on the topic of separation, Premier Danielle Smith laid out more of her vision today about exploring the possibility of a referendum. The plan involves challenging Ottawa over what Smith says are intrusions into provincial matters. CTV's Mike Lecouture was listening in to her speech. And Mike, was there anything new that we haven't heard from the Premier yet?
Yeah, well, Sandy, we do know who is going to be on this Alberta Next panel, and she said it will be 4 members of her cabinet, so 4 of her ministers. She's going to chair it. She also says there will be some notable people from the province of Alberta, including a former Justice Honourable Bruce McDonald. He's a former Justice of the Court of Appeal of Alberta. Also, Trevor Toome, who is a professor of economics at the University of Calgary and public school and public policy. So he will be part of it as well. This is going to be essentially a listening tour. They're going to be touring around the province and having a number of in-person and virtual town halls. The idea, as Danielle Smith has kind of presented it, Sandy, is to really get ideas for any kinds of questions that they do want to put to the entire province. She didn't say that this is going to be only on either their sovereignty or not, but she says she wants a strong, sovereign Alberta within Canada. So kind of murkying the waters there a little bit, but certainly saying this doesn't mean it is a referendum on separation for sure. Those are going to be coming, any kind of referendum vote in 2026. And she did give a bit of an idea of what she wants as the possibilities of outcomes for these questions. Have a listen to how she put it.
They will consider and hear from Albertans on the risks and benefits of ideas like establishing an Alberta pension plan, utilizing an Alberta Provincial Police Service rather than the RCMP for community policing, whether Albertans should pursue constitutional changes to the composition of the Senate and the House of Commons.
Now, one of the more contentious issues here, Sandy, is that Bill 54 is lowering the threshold for any kind of constitutional referendum. So instead of roughly 600,000 people that would be required, those types of signatures, it's only going to be around 177,000. So that is something that she still faces as a headwind there, but certainly she's laid out the plans, and she's going to be going across her province listening to people this summer. Sandy?
Okay, Mike, thank you for this. Still ahead after the break, an electrifying Canadian first. Project Arrow, a Canadian-designed, Canadian-built prototype. Get ready for something called Canada's answer to Tesla. It is a zero-emission electric car made with nearly all Canadian components and designed by students at Carleton University. CTV's Sean Leathong is in Toronto, where the car is being showcased following a European tour. And Sean, I know that this is called Project Arrow, which certainly harkens back to the Avro Arrow, that supersonic aircraft that was built in the 1950s, but mothballed. Obviously, the hope here is that this car will be built, right?
And that is the dream, Sandy. You can see it behind us, an electric vehicle built in Canada, designed in Canada, and using all Canadian parts. In fact, 97% of the materials in the automobile you see behind me come from Canada. Now, this is a joint venture from the Auto Parts Manufacturers Association, along with Carleton University, as you mentioned, and Ontario Tech University, and they assembled the car. And this car has been on the road, and it's been around the world, showcasing what Canada can do. And it's actually brought business to Canada on the EV front. Now, the vehicle we see is the 2023 version, which premiered at the Consumer Electronics Showcase in Las Vegas, but they're actually moving it forward. Now, Project Arrow 2.0 will eventually have 6 vehicles built. They want to build a fleet with the idea of building a Canadian car company. Here's Flavio Volpe from the Auto Parts Manufacturers Association. Here's what he had to say.
We're in a moment now where we're talking about building a resilient Canadian economy while it's under attack by the guy in the White House. And the Prime Minister's challenged everybody to be ambitious. Well, there's nothing more ambitious than launching a Canadian car company. And we think that the Project Arrow, both the first one and the second one, help to articulate mathematically that Canada can build a car company.
Now, the idea would be 5 years at the earliest that this thing could be retailed. They have to get the people together. Sandy?
Okay, Sean, thanks so much for this. Now, something you don't see every day on a residential street, a drawn-out brawl between a couple of black bears.
I go for walks every day by this area, by the creek,
and I think it's going to scare me now for a while.
Well, the animals engaged in an hour-long fight on a Burnaby street. Some cars turned away while some drivers stayed to watch the fur fly until the animals retreated back to the woods. And we don't know whether they left as friends or went their separate ways. And we'll be right back. An emotional stop in Thunder Bay, Ontario for Daryl Fox, the brother of Canadian hero Terry Fox. It's where 45 years ago, on September the 1st, 1980, Terry had to end his cross-country marathon of hope because his cancer had returned. CTV's Abigail Beeman takes us down the road on a sentimental journey for a man who knew Terry well. Abigail.
Sandy, 45 years ago, Terry Fox started his run in St. John's and headed west. Now his brother and a team of cyclists started on the Pacific Coast and are heading in the opposite direction, saying you can never replicate what Terry did. They're now past the halfway point and a location heavy with meaning.
Daryl Fox has been thinking about this stop for weeks.
I knew I was going to get to this point, and I knew that it would be extremely emotional, and it has been.
Thunder Bay, Ontario, where his brother Terry was forced to end his marathon of hope 45 years ago.
We got to go home and try and do some more treatment.
Daryl's team of cyclists started in Vancouver, riding an average of 220 kilometers a day, calling it the National Ride of Hope, Terry's dream on wheels.
He didn't do it for himself, he was doing it for others. So to me, that's the reason why I'm here. I aspire to be like that.
Through heat, injuries, and grueling days, keeping Terry's message of hope alive fuels these cyclists.
This journey has been about meeting people who have experienced cancer and are alive today because the investment we made over the last 45 years in cancer research.
Now past the halfway mark and headed on to St. John's, where Terry dipped his artificial leg in the Atlantic to start the run in 1980.
I wake up every morning and I pinch myself because who am I? I'm Terry Fox's brother, and he's within me every day, every pedal stroke. Terry has taught me that limitations are self-imposed and we can do anything, and that's what I'm trying to do.
The cyclists are getting very close to their fundraising goal of $1 million and hope to surpass it. Over the decades, the Terry Fox Foundation has raised more than $900 million for cancer research. Sandy?
Impressive. Okay, thanks so much, Abigail. And thank you for sharing your time with us. I'm Sandy Ronaldo. Your local CTV News is coming up. See you tomorrow, we hope.
CTV
Bye for now.
National News.